Formula 1 podcast, where we use fake money to buy real F1 teams to win imaginary points.
Nice.
Man, this is great. I'm Paul. That's Ben. I'm serious. Am I Paul or are you Ben? I don't know. We are discussing.
We are both Matt Damon.
We are both Matt Damon. Yes, we are. I'll take his paycheck too and his filmography.
Actually, you know what? Total side. We're starting off with the side notes. You can go down a whole rabbit trail of how he, despite his success, he has made some of the worst acting decisions ever, as far as how much money he could have made and franchises he walked away from versus what he accepted.
Oh, what is?
I think the most glaring one, and again, this is me not being prepared to back all that.
Oh, sure,
with the exception of he was supposed to have the lead in Avatar, and James Cameron offered him a percentage of the profits rather than a set paycheck. So, and at the time, I think it actually has reclaimed being the most profitable movie, because after they re-released it in theaters prior to Part 2 coming out, it then resurpassed the Avengers movies.
Oh my gosh, he could have had a chunk of that.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Wow. So at that point, he'd just be like that old Bugs Bunny cartoon or whatever, where the nice old widows like taking wads of cash and tossing into the fire for heat.
Yeah,
sort of
for
thing.
Sure. He could totally do
absolutely. That. Absolutely. Well, we are discussing the Fantasy Formula 1 world post-Hungary, pre-Belgium Grand Prix.
Yes.
And I've always been kind of wondering if we should title these the Belgian Grand Prix episode or the post-Hungarian Grand Prix episode. I think the whatever's coming next, but it's kind of the same thing because we address both. We address what they did the previous one and what to expect for the next one.
I think we tend to focus more on what had just happened, so I would lean towards post.
Okay. But then it's also kind of we're talking about the past.
That is
and
true.
It's not forward-leaning, because as soon as I say, the Hungarian whatever, it's like, well, maybe the review of the Hungarian, we can see.
We're figuring it out.
We're figuring it out as we go.
We're forging a path here.
But that's fine. So this is the post-Hungarian pre-Belgian Grand Prix. We have a lot to talk about. First off, and I just want to kick it right out the door, Max Verstappen. For the poker players in the world, is he on tilt?
Oh, no, he's absolutely on tilt.
Yeah, like he kind of lost his marbles. Like, not trying to be disrespectful to him, because I understand heat of the moment, like you're passionate, you're going, you're fighting. But it really seems like since they haven't been doing all that bang up of a job recently as a constructor, I mean, don't get me wrong, Sergio Perez qualified 16, which sucks, but he got up to 7th, which is good for him. Got like what we just looked earlier, 20 fantasy points. But Max Verstappen, man, he's arguing with his team. He's arguing with his engineer.
Well, here's what we're seeing. I think why things seem so stark is because he's adjusting his style. When you have the fastest car, your focus is on precision.
Okay.
I've got the best car, so all of my attention needs to be on minimizing mistakes and see by how many entire seconds I can beat the rest of the pack by.
Yeah.
It's a precision video game at that point. In this case, he no longer has the fastest car. He's a great racer, but there's going to be more of an aggression. There's going to be more of a fire kind of lit underneath him it's more of a competitive juice as opposed to a meditation on doing everything perfectly.
That's a good way to put it. Okay, that would make a lot more sense, and also why he's stressed, why he's openly stressing more, because he's no longer. You're right, trying to. Well, I won by 20 seconds instead of the normal 35. It's okay. We just didn't have the best car. We didn't know whatever.
Right
now he's struggling and fighting.
He's had
it's a gunfight.
He's traded in. He's had to trade in his sniper rifle for a sawed-off shotgun, you run out of shells there, you're going to start bonking people over the head with the stock.
And then when it happens when poor Lewis Hamilton happens to be the person you bonk, and then you freaking go, I don't know, was he all 4 tires off the road?
I don't know.
I know at least 2.
I saw a couple screen grabs where he was up there.
He was, and at least his nose, right, the front wing was on the ground as his man.
It was a Ricky Bobby moment. It's like, I'm flying through the air.
Flying through the air, not good. But no, I thought he was out. Like I thought he was toast. But he
because he is still Max.
Yeah.
He got 5th place, which again, so many people on the grid would kill to get P5.
Oh, absolutely.
So for him to have to settle for P5 after going airborne,
right?
Not bad.
Yeah.
He's still Max Verstappen.
Yeah.
He's not suddenly
not
Max Verstappen. I didn't.
No.
I didn't have a good analogy.
But I think that's good enough. I mean, that's just fine. Yeah, that's a good point though. So we're not hating for all you haters out there. Don't think we're haters for Max Verstappen. We're not. It's just he's in the gunfight. He's in the pack right now, and they need to make it happen. And from a fantasy perspective, his value hasn't decreased with his lack of assured points now,
which is interesting.
Yeah,
the field is so much more level amongst the top 5 or 6 drivers.
Yeah,
so you would think that value would have to come down, or maybe it's just that everyone else is going up.
Yeah, because what would happen as soon as Max Verstappen went from 30 million down to 25 million? Everybody would buy it. I'd buy it.
Oh, for sure.
I'd put him on my team.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. I don't know what they're going to do with that. And hopefully, and I don't want to, before I go in, we have some really cool stats to look at.
Oh,
I want to get to those here in a minute. But I want to finish talking about the Hungarian Grand Prix real quick.
Oh, well, let's stay on Red Bull for just a second.
Yeah.
The other Red Bull driver, Sergio Perez, he got off to a terrible start. Bonked out, and I don't know why I'm saying bonked out. I don't think anyone has
ever said. But I say bonk whenever our baby knocks her head against.
Okay, no, that's
bonk.
fair. So he had a terrible qualifying. He was out by Q1. So I think he started P16, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep, P16. Him and George Russell in the back.
We've been pretty mean to him lately. He was the second best driver all season last year.
Yeah,
had a strong start this season, and then we've just been dogging on him since then. Because and I think rightfully so. However, let's go credit where credit's due. It's not glamorous by any stretch, but the guy starts P16, and he's the guy we say wherever he starts, he will generally finish.
That's true.
He made it all the way back up to P7, and Hungary is known for being tough for overtakes.
In a track where you were just look at everybody else, it was pretty stagnant.
Yeah, and that, and so it certainly wasn't the spotlight moment when you've got a double McLaren and you've got strong teammanship, and you've got Mercedes being solid Mercedes. You've got Ferrari still in the pack there. When you put all of those headlines aside, you've got Sergio Perez going from P16 to P7.
And bringing you 20 fantasy points. Which isn't bad.
Relative to his past month and a half, sure, that's great.
Yeah,
if you still have him for some reason.
And we're gonna discuss that because we'll just touch on it real quick. So we have right here, as you're looking at, because I actually hit record this week, unlike last week. Hey yo,
look at that, we learn.
We do sort of. It takes a few months, but Sergio Perez 9% pick.
Wow,
only 9%.
What a drop off!
Everybody is pretty divested of Sergio Perez right now, which. I mean, you kind of have to be just because of his price tag. I'm curious where he was at the start of the year. So I didn't have the stats for Bahrain.
I mean, I had him,
Yes. Sergio Perez up 9% still. That doesn't seem right.
I don't think
Sergio Perez up to 13 for round 3. And then Sergio Perez 13. Sergio Perez 13. Missed those stats. Sergio Perez 11. He hasn't been getting much love, period. I need to go back and double check. I mean, I've been copying these stats over week to week for the most of them.
Yeah.
But that's weird that he's got that much little love going on.
Yeah, no, I expected that to be much higher.
Me too. That's super interesting. But still, he got you the point. So my bummer, again, like we mentioned last week with Sergio, with all of Red Bull, my bummer is his price tag. Oh, as soon as you get him for $5 million less or $6 million less, he's in.
Absolutely. Yeah. Do you have the week to week stats for everybody?
Yeah. So right here, just for the overall points. So every week, and this is
I'm sorry, the week to week selection stats, like you just did for Perez.
Yeah. So right here, column H.
Oh, I see.
Is the percentages.
Okay.
So and this is just copied. This isn't anything I came up with. All of this is copied straight from the F1 website, the fancy F1 website.
But you got all in one place.
But I got all in one place.
Beautiful. How has Max? In his last couple weeks, going from week 1 to week now.
Okay, yeah. So Max Verstappen 47% overall starting round 2 Saudi, which is where I started keeping up with this.
Sure.
And then round 3, Max Verstappen had 48%. Round 4, Max Verstappen 46. Then Max Verstappen 46. Didn't keep those stats. Round 7, Italy. Max Verstappen's 43, so he started dropping off.
And and this is earlier in the season when we were discussing as well that Max and Red Bull together were a little bit too much to hang on to at once. And so this is when we were much more on the hey, maybe go Ferrari or Ferrari and McLaren. So that tracks, but he's had a couple rough weeks.
He
So
has.
Let's see where we're at now.
So now we are at going into Belgium. Excuse me. Max Verstappen's at 42.
Interesting.
Which it still seems pretty ride or die.
Oh no, absolutely. That's way less of a drop off than I would have expected.
And we will go to we'll talk about the constructors in a minute. I want to be careful to kind of save that for the end. But yeah, if we're looking at Sergio Perez, he's fluctuates a couple percent. Max Verstappen fluctuates a couple percent. Here's a number while we're talking about drivers before we get back to Hungary and talking about McLaren.
This is very interesting.
So Williams, Alex Albon,
this
week 48% have him on his team. He has 11 points.
Really?
Half of fantasy players have Alexander Albon on his team because he's 8.9 million, right? If we were to go back to round 2, which again is the first time we started keeping stats, 61%. So he's had some of a drop off, but not as much as.
I'm really surprised.
I'm baffled.
So when I said, "Oh, this is really interesting," I thought you were going to talk about a different stat, but I'm glad you're on this one because I think it was about a month ago we talked about the stat going into how many people had DNFs because that's what just murders you, especially when you're taking those lower tier drivers. And it turns out, despite Logan Sargent having a generally lower performance threshold than Albon, he had been historically safer as far as fantasy points because he actually has less DNFs than Albon.
Interesting.
Does.
I haven't kept up with. I think I can go here to the fantasy.
So that's so interesting to me because I think Sargent remains the safer choice from a non-liability perspective. Will Albon go higher on the grid, or will he end up in a higher position? Generally, yes, but at that when you're in that P14, 15, 16, 17 range, it's really so much more about just not DNFing.
Yeah,
and just because you might score 7 or 8 points per race, but that immediately gets erased by a negative 20.
So correct. So if we look at Logan Sargent, right, he has 6 points. He's netted 6 points all season. Six
fantasy points.
Fantasy points. Sorry, this is all fantasy points, everybody. Fantasy points. He has 6 fantasy points all season, which brings him now to a 0.09 points per million. So basically,
not awesome.
But Alex Albon is 11 points all season, bringing him to a 0.1. So they're basically, he and Alex Albon are the same points per million.
Except Logan Sargent.
Sargent is two-thirds.
So Sargent's 5.1, is it?
Sargent is, where did he go? Logan Sargent is 5.1 million. Alex Albon's 8.9.
For a
100th.
For a 4 fantasy point.
Yeah, for a 4 fantasy point total difference.
When ultimately, at that point in your roster, what you're doing is picking someone who will save you money to afford a higher end driver or a higher end constructor.
And that's the reason why Logan Sargent has 23% selection rate, because he's keeping you in the green and he only costs 5.1 million. His value has gone down.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I think that is such an overlook on all the people who still at 48% have Alex Albon. You're thinking in terms of Formula One, not fantasy Formula One.
Exactly. They're thinking that, well, Alex Albon's the better driver.
Sure.
In real life.
Right.
This isn't real life. This is fantasy Formula One, like you just said. And you need to go to Logan Sargent.
Yeah. If your fantasy Formula One team is a car that you are building, your higher end drivers are your engine and your steering, your maneuverability. Those lower end drivers are like, I need a little bit more cargo space. I'm 6'2". I need a little more headroom.
Yeah.
Oh, Logan Sargent will give me that extra clearance.
Exactly. And yeah. So that's the interesting thing about there. Now, again, before we get too far away from Hungary, McLaren.
Yeah.
All right. So for everybody who is relatively new to this podcast, you and I are military officers, former military officers.
Correct.
So orders are paramount. If you are told you will do this, you can object, you can strenuously object, but you do it offline, you follow your orders, and then during the hot wash, during the debrief, you sit down with whoever gave you those orders, close the door behind you, and assuming they're your boss, respectfully call them a moron. All right?
Yep.
But you don't disregard, you don't argue, you don't get into a no kidding fight, and literally, and I understand this is military, not racing, I get it, but he literally quit talking to his engineer, and they're like, radio check, yeah, I hear you, and he just quit talking to him because he didn't want. What do you think about all that?
Well,
like,
I gotta say, I got onto I scammed my way onto the show through my ignorance, because we were having dinner and you're telling me about Formula One. I knew nothing about team construction. I didn't know that there were 2 cars per team. I thought it was like, oh, there's this car, there's this car, there's this car. I had no idea about the team dynamic at all, and that blew my mind. And so I was like, let me ask the dumb questions, because this is fascinating to me. This is a whole world.
Mm-hmm.
This is like Men in Black when you open the locker and there's a whole civilization living in the locker, and I'm like, I didn't know this thing existed. This is incredible. And this is one of the things that intrigued me so much, because again, you have these 2 brazen drivers, because you have to be brazen if you're in Formula One, and they're supposed to work cooperatively. There's strategy involved, but beyond strategy, there's kind of paying dues where due is due.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there might be a very specific primary and secondary driver. Hello, Williams. And there are people who respect that dynamic shift, but then there are people who don't. Hello, Ferrari. Where you got Sainz and Leclerc who are like, look at this, we're P1, P2. We're fighting. Or the principal says, I want this guy going here, and they're like, nope, we're fighting.
Yeah.
So cool. So much like
Love it.
Great man drama,
Yes.
So like, I have zero problem with Lando being like, I have the lead.
Why don't mess with my win here?
Look at Nico Hülkenberg, who's never even been on the podium in his entire career.
Mm-hmm.
So every race is so significant.
That's a good way to look at it.
People have waited their entire lives to get on that podium to win.
Yeah.
And so to ask someone who is in the lead right near the end, hey, let your teammate win because he has supported you.
Mm-hmm. And we should have pitted him instead of you, but we did you to protect against Lewis Hamilton and all this behind the scenes stuff.
Yeah.
And now, hey, sorry, bro, we goofed up on our strategy. Just let him pass you.
Right. And so like that is a huge ask.
Yeah.
And so I have zero issue with Lando Norris being human and saying, yeah, I hear you. Just give me a minute to swallow down some stomach acid here before I answer you.
Yeah. And he was like, oh, you let Oscar pass you. He's like, okay, let him catch up.
Right. And I respect that too.
Yeah,
hey,
for sure.
Look at that. You have the best of both worlds. You're P1, P2. Let your guys fight it out as long as they don't crash into each other, which we've seen so many other teams do.
Yeah.
Alpine, Red Bull's done that before.
Mm-hmm.
That was back in the Daniel Ricciardo days.
Yeah.
But when you have a team crash out against each other, that's the worst thing possible. But I can totally see the mentality of, look at that, we got the top 2 cars. Let's see which one wants to finish.
Yeah.
But this is how we know McLaren's the real deal. Ultimately, Formula One has to be a team sport.
Yeah.
And Oscar has supported Lando.
Mm-hmm.
And now Lando's like, you know what? I got to pay my dues to my teammate here.
Yeah.
Wow. We haven't seen that from Ferrari.
No.
Would we have seen that if it was Mercedes in P1, P2, where Lewis Hamilton's on his way out and George Russell is still staying in Mercedes? I don't think we would have.
I don't think so. I think they would have just gone ahead and said, well, you're not going to fire me. You're not going to fire me over this.
Right.
So I'll take my win. You guys need to unscrew yourselves.
At this point, would we have seen that with Max Verstappen and Sergio Perez, with Sergio like, I need a win here, guys? Would there have been that level of cooperativeness?
Oh, there's no way Max would have.
Oh, yeah. No, he would never have let that happen.
No, never. No, he's not going to let Sergio Perez beat him.
So this is super cool. I find no fault in Lando having to take a minute to swallow that decision and then going with it. So good for them, man. Like that's classy, but it's human.
Yeah. No, I could agree with that. I could agree with that perspective. It was weird for me just because it's like, dude, follow orders. Like, you're told to do it.
I gotcha.
Freaking do it.
Yeah.
But you're right. I'm not the athlete who's literally trained since I was a fetus to beat okay, maybe not literally. I know what literally means.
Like, your mom's tough.
I know, right? Right. But no, who's trained since they were, could sit upright to drive a car.
Yeah.
And now they're like, hey, man, no, it's not your fault. we were trying to protect against Lewis Hamilton. We shouldn't have done it.
Sure.
So go ahead and give the spot back to him. Like, no.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know. But good for us. Then how about this? Does it water? I have my opinion on it. Do you think it waters down the victory for Oscar?
I think I would say yes, except that he did have the lead for so long.
He did.
You know,
he followed orders.
He followed orders, and he performed well. It wasn't just okay. Hey, let your little brother have one.
Exactly.
You know,
it wasn't
like
that.
What the heck? This is so not fair.
If they had treated them both as square and said, you know what, lead driver, you're the lead.
Yeah.
You are ahead of your teammate in the race. We're giving you the best strategy we have. Go.
Right.
They went ahead and did okay, Lando, we want to make sure that you're our insurance policy in case Oscar goofs up.
Well, and that's exactly it. You know, I've got a 10 and a 3-year-old kid.
Okay.
You know, and I've had to have a couple talks with a 10-year-old lately where it's just like things are not equal. I have so much more respect for you because you're 10 and your sister's 3, but I also expect a lot more common sense out of you.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to come down a little harder on you when you don't use that common sense.
That's a good way to look at it.
Yeah, the rules are different for you two, and she's had to be like, I get
I
that.
hate it, but
sucks,
I get it.
You know,
yeah.
This is not that with Lando and Oscar.
Okay.
You know, Oscar Piastri was a very capable racer throughout this race.
Sure.
You know, and he was sticking to the game plan. He was doing very well. He was P1 for a lot of that.
Yeah.
And when he pitted when he was supposed to, he performed, I think, well enough to have deserved P1.
That's true. Yeah, he took the lead off the first lap.
Yeah.
The team said box, he boxed.
Yeah. It sucks that there will be that conversation about, you know, did he earn it? But as far as the team dynamic goes, he did earn it.
I completely agree with you. I think he raced his heart out. He raced the best race he could. He was in the lead for it on merit.
Yep.
And the team came up with a strategy, and as soon as they implemented the strategy, and now he's behind his teammate,
right?
I would be pissed as hell if they didn't let me take it back.
Yeah.
Because everybody knows that Lando Norris is fast as hell, right? They're both, assuming they're both equally fast cars,
sure,
and equally good drivers. Well, then, okay, as soon as it's you and me, and I'm leading, it's like, all right, guys, here's our strategy pit, and I come out and I'm looking at your taillights. I'm like, hey, dude, what the hell?
Yeah.
And they would have gone back and, like, if I was Piastri at that point, I'd have been like, wait a minute, you literally took my victory from me and gave it to Lando Norris.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
How valued am I here?
Well, and I think Oscar can have partied all night long in Hungary with a clean conscience because it's like, have I been under orders to block for and to defend for Lando? Yes. Have I done it? Yes.
Yeah.
So him following orders to support me, we're on the same page.
Yeah.
You know,
his job was to fall back and defend against Ferrari or Mercedes or whoever it was and just give Lando that few extra seconds, or Max would give Lando that few extra seconds to ensure he won.
Yeah.
Got it.
Now, that being said, the moment McLaren is not in the running for the Constructors' Championship, and you know, and there's all, you know, if they are out of that at that point, if, you know, say Lando still has a chance for the individual, you know, for the Drivers' Championship, then I can see Lando having a much harder time falling back into a support role of any kind.
Yeah, but that's the pre-brief, which you sit there before the race.
Yeah,
and you're like, all right, everybody, we're out of the Constructors.
Right. What are we trying to accomplish today?
We're trying to make sure our driver gets P1 or P2 in Constructors. So, Oscar, love you, bro.
Yeah.
You're
unless Lando crashes out.
But you also need from the teams, and you have to let them know, hey, we're also not holding it against you.
Correct.
As soon as we're racing here, and your job is to hold off Mercedes and McLaren and Max Verstappen, whatever, for that half a lap before they pass you.
Yeah.
You're going to get P5 now, but that extra 0.3 of a second that you bought him is going to be enough to ensure that Lando Norris gets the victory. Then you brief it, and then when he does that, when he executes according to plan, he comes in, and that's a win for him.
Correct.
You know, you can't be like, well, and then when it comes time to renew his freaking contract, you're like, well, you finished P5 a whole lot, man. It's like, dude, what? No, I'm not saying they're doing that. It's
sure.
No,
I'm with you. Yeah, there's an integrity side to the constructor as well that needs to be upheld. But everyone's playing nice in McLaren. They
are. They're trying to sort out everything.
Sure.
What about, let's move on to Mercedes. So Mercedes has been doing really, really well. I became a huge fan of Mercedes. I got Mercedes on all of my teams. And then Russell did where did Russell qualify? He did pretty bad. He qualified P6. He qualified P17.
Came up to P8 though.
And came up to P8, and Lewis Hamilton qualified P5 and came up to the podium. I'm saying because of how hot it was, because of everybody brought some sort of modifications. From what the Talking Heads on F1.com said, every car brought some sort of modification for the heat for the track. It wasn't necessarily an upgrade,
Right.
but they changed something for the track because of how rough the conditions were. So the fact that Mercedes did that well,
Yeah.
I think that's still that's nothing negative on them that about Russell. Like, I'm keeping Russell, keeping Lewis Hamilton, keeping Mercedes on my fantasy team.
Oh, for sure.
Okay.
Now, what I will revisit though is I think a couple weeks back we were talking about, we were kind of charting the ascendance of Mercedes from their lower points earlier in the season, and we're saying, oh no, I think Mercedes is legit, but at this point it's kind of 6 in one, half a dozen in the other when you're talking Russell versus Hamilton.
Yeah.
At this point, I think Hamilton, based on at least the last 2 weeks, Hamilton is the stronger performer now.
I can see that.
He's definitely shining through. So
I think if you're but Hamilton is, let's go to the numbers here. So going into Hungary, Hamilton, actually, let's rewind 3 races. Let's look back in time, right? Let's look back at Austria.
okay.
So Lewis Hamilton cost 21.7.
Yep.
And George Russell cost 21.1.
Okay.
So they were basically same.
And their points per million was
And they're
a little different,
175
though.
and
0.83 versus 0.7.
Lewis, yeah, because Russell had more points.
Correct.
But now, fast forward 3 races to the start of Belgium, Lewis Hamilton has 247 fantasy points. George Russell has 236.
Wow. Yeah. So
Because he took that DNF and last week, and he didn't qualify in the points this week, and he did fine.
now with the qualifying, what happened to Russell? Was it that he ran out of fuel during qualifying?
Oh yeah, that was it. That was this week, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what happened, and I need to go back and look at it, but they put him out there to do like the light fuel, sticky tires, warm up, push lap, whatever. And something interfered with that. I forget if somebody spun. I forget if somebody hit the wall, like what went on. But he had to go out there and drive a few laps. And so he didn't have enough fuel to do a full push lap at the very end. So when everybody else did their final push laps, because again, if you guys don't watch it, which I don't know why you're listening to this podcast if you don't watch Formula One, but it's a thing where the cars will do their last warm-up lap and then cross the finish line like with 10 seconds to spare before the end of qualifying. And so that's the last lap that counts because there's more rubber on the track and whatever. So whatever happened, they misallocated his fuel. So he was not able to do that last push lap, so he qualified P17. But it was due to circumstances outside.
What the dynamics at play are so weird. Again, in comparison to another sport, it's like before the baseball game, they forgot to include shoelaces for your team.
Yeah.
So like they have the cleats, but no shoelaces. Now go play baseball.
Or like for this one, for baseball, it's like, well, we were going to go to extra innings, and hey, you're the pitcher. You can throw 20 pitches this inning. Okay, got it. And then because there was a time delay and you had to stay warm, you had to throw 3 or 4 extra warm-up pitches, and that ate into your 20 overall, so they pulled you.
And also,
sort of thing.
there's a rule that no later than the 8th inning, you have to switch your glove hand from your throwing hand.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. And so, but this does the George Russell and his ascension, how well he did. Let me bring up that screen. So in Hungary, he qualified 16, finished 8th.
Which is not bad.
Which is not bad at all, right?
Just
He
sucks
saved
it-
that
yeah,
point.
yeah.
But this does show that this proves, like before we talked about, there's some players that as drivers that you want, if they qualify low, they're going to finish higher.
Right.
He's going to finish, 8, 9 places higher than when he qualifies, if he qualifies in the back of the pack. Unlike, well, I guess not. It's Sergio Perez this week.
Perez, yeah.
Same thing.
So
right?
again, Perez and Russell both did well given their bad starting position, which is rough, but I mean, they worked with what they had.
And so, but to go full circle back to who do you put money on now? Well, Lewis Hamilton is now 23.1 million, and George Russell, because of that DNF, is still 21.2.
So,
See, so with me and my teams, I'm able to divest and move some people around, and we'll talk about that here in a minute.
yeah.
and I can get George Russell and Lando Norris on my Mercedes McLaren team.
which is not bad. So
Not bad at all, but I can't afford.
My Mercedes contingent on my teams has been Russell for the past 2 weeks.
Oh,
and again, both times it has not been his fault.
No.
But it sure hurts me.
Yeah, and but that's the same with with the Pierre Gasly. 2 races in a row, 2 DNFs. I had him on my. I had the first DNF. I'm like, no, it was just constructor, whatever. My bad.
Right.
Another DNF for the same thing: water cooling, hydraulics, the liquids on his car.
Yeah.
Something's up with it. I don't know. I did structure and hydraulics for the Navy way back when, and I know as soon as you had to bring the aircraft back twice for something you goofed up on, you're probably fired. So I got rid of Pierre Gasly this next year. I'm done with him just because.
Oh yeah, no, it's
yeah. So, but do you put Russell on it in favor in place of somebody?
Well, and that's the problem. Mercedes is doing better. His DNFs or his poor placement were not his fault.
No,
but how many more times do you put up with something happening outside of his control? Which is rough.
Which is very rough. Anything you want to talk about with the race before we go into these cool stats that I concocted?
No, I think we covered some of the bigger, broader points. But
Okay.
yeah, let's dive into these stats.
Okay, so as you mentioned last week, right? It's all about what have you done for me lately in fantasy, in Formula One, yes, but especially in fantasy Formula One, right?
Yeah.
Well, I decided to see how teams had done over the last 3 races. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Right. So I took the numbers partially because I hadn't updated the numbers, so I took the numbers from Austria, going into Austria, right, and then I compared them to the numbers going into Belgium this week. Percent pick this is for constructors only.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
Just for the constructors. Because which constructor's the best? Mercedes or Ferrari, right? McLaren or Red Bull? Like, how's all that shaking out?
Right.
Well, Alpine, percent picked, and Aston Martin are the exact same amount of people picking them
As a
3 weeks
constructor.
ago to now as a constructor on their team.
Who's picking them?
Just people.
Oh, gotcha. I mean,
Yeah, just a percent pick.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm with you.
Yeah. Ferrari, 5% increase. Haas, 1% decrease. Kick Sauber, same amount, 0. McLaren and Mercedes have both decreased 3% overall picks.
That's interesting.
It is. And I don't know how they derive these numbers. I don't know if it's just at the end of the race they just publish it, or if they keep track on who clicks and who buys and who sells.
See, because none of this makes any sense to me.
None.
Because I could see, I would imagine we'd see Mercedes increase. No, you know what? This is why. Why? Mercedes is decreasing, because Russell has had 2 bad races.
You know what? I bet you're right.
That's got to be it. If we looked before 2 weeks ago, we'd see an uptick in Mercedes and a drop in Ferrari. I'm surprised though that we're seeing a drop in McLaren.
A stat that's coming out in my brain is with Lando Norris.
Lando Norris.
Words are hard. He has fallen back. He's qualified he's qualified P1 and not finished P1. He won one of the races.
Sure.
But he has consistently qualified better than he's finished. And I know the talking heads on F1.com were lamenting that. So maybe that has something to do with it, but I still don't know. The only thing I can think is you're getting rid of McLaren and Mercedes to get Red Bull went up by 1%. I don't know why.
No,
and I don't know. And I also don't know where these numbers come from and how they derive them, so they might be misleading.
Okay.
But let's go to the next column, which is points scored in the last 3 races. So 1/4 of the races run.
Mm-hmm.
McLaren has scored 188 points. Mercedes has scored 172 points. Red Bull has scored 150 points. Over the last 3 races, you can save $5 million a race by going to Mercedes or McLaren and actually score a point instead of Red Bull and scoring more points.
Gotcha. That makes a lot of sense. And these stats are fascinating to me. This is one of the few things that you did show me before we started the podcast.
Mm-hmm.
This may shock you. We don't do a whole lot of preparation for this podcast. We get together, we talk for maybe about 5 minutes, and then we talk about completely unrelated things for about 20 minutes.
Exactly.
And then we say, "All right, you ready to start recording?" But this set of stats kind of blew my mind. It's like you're seeing the Rubik's Cube from a whole different perspective, and this is a great way to track the "What have you done for me lately" stat, because we're seeing a quarter of the total. So the last 3 races represents now, is it a quarter?
A quarter.
A quarter of the season.
Yep, we've raced a quarter of the season raced so far. Exactly. We've had 12 races completed.
Yes. And so we're seeing what percentage of points have these teams amassed over the last quarter of the season, over the last completed quarter of the season. So in theory, everyone should be, if they were performing consistently, everyone should be achieving 25%
exactly
of their points
if it was consistent
over the last three weeks.
Correct.
So that's your over under right there. So is your team doing well? They should be getting over 25%.
They should. Let's dive into those numbers, shall we?
Let's do it.
Alpine, 3%.
Which makes sense. They had a double DNF,
Yep.
and then the prior week, at least one DNF,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
So-
they've been on the struggle bus. They have scored 4 points in the last 3 races.
Yes.
Aston Martin, 29 points. 29%, sorry. They've scored 29% of overall points in the last 25% of races. So it's about average.
Yeah, well, and
A
that's
little bit better.
they are such an enigma to me because, again, you think, you've got Alonso and Stroll, but they tend to flip-flop back and forth as to who's doing better, and you're averaging somewhere between P8 and P14.
Right.
It's so middle of the pack.
Yeah. They've only scored 81 points in the last 4 races, which is half. Which is 100 points off of Mercedes.
Yeah, they are your quintessential 50th percentile
Yep.
child. It's like, how'd you do in math and English? Yeah, average.
For sure. Ferrari, 21%.
So yeah, well, and they've had a couple of rough weeks,
Yeah.
and which, especially since the established dominance of McLaren and the ascendance of Mercedes. So you can see they've had to make some room.
They've lost some of their market share.
Can I pause this?
Oh yeah, go ahead.
I'm so sorry.
You're fine.
Hello. Hello.
And that's the way I'll find it.
Gotcha.
Okay.
All right. So Ferrari's decrease in performance makes sense to me. They're still doing all right. You're still finding them in the top 5-6 positions.
Yeah, McLaren's just eating in. So they still have 151 points, right? So that's still solid. That's still as good as Red Bull.
And again, to clarify, that's 151 points
Fantasy.
achieved over the last 3 weeks.
151 points achieved, fantasy points achieved over the last 3 weeks.
Not
exactly.
bad.
No, not bad at all.
But not as good as the rest of the season.
Exactly. So Haas, 42%
it's the
of the points. Yeah.
So massive jump there.
Massive jump.
It's the Hülkenberg factor. A couple of P6s, definitely getting in the points in a meaningful way. But that's 42% of their points is 81 points,
and that's also the same amount as Aston Martin.
Really? Look at that.
So Haas has done as well as Aston Martin, and they've gone down 1%. I don't get it. I'm starting to question this percent picked. Because it just doesn't seem to make sense. I don't know where they're getting their information from.
No.
But anyway.
Actually, you know what? I can see that because the driver value for both Magnussen and Hülkenberg has consistently climbed. So
that's true.
If you're trying to make if you're trying to make value space on your fantasy team, you're going to start dumping. Unfortunately, it's like you have to. If I want to get a couple premier drivers, if I want to get a McLaren heavy team or a McLaren Mercedes heavy team, I got to start saying goodbye to my Hulkenbergs and my Magnussens and saying, all right, come on, Kick Sauber.
Yeah. Honestly, that's what I might be doing this week is dumping both of the Haas drivers just because then I can afford Oscar Piastri and Logan Sargent.
Yeah, and so that's the only way I can justify or wrap my head around the idea that people are picking them less despite how much stronger they've been. And again, if you're equivalent to Aston Martin and you're Haas, like what a weird sentence to say.
Right.
I would have lost that bet. It's
right.
So good for them.
Kick Sauber 16%. Not surprised they've gotten 14 points.
No change.
Zero
selection.
But no one's getting rid of them.
Again, because they're your cargo space team.
8%. Yep. But it was so weird that as a constructor, somebody has, But anyway, that just depends on your strategy. McLaren, 27 points, and Mercedes, 29 points. Sorry, 29%, 27%, and 29%. So they've overachieved.
Yes.
Right? Barely, but they've overachieved.
Correct.
So the best team is McLaren, 188 points over the last 3 races. Mercedes, 172 points over the last 3 races.
But look at that, though, because, over the last 3 weeks. So when did Russell get his win? Was it 3 weeks ago?
Oh, I need to go back and check.
Because what's so interesting is Russell gets his win.
Russell UK, no, he DNF'd in UK, Austria, a sprint race position first.
Okay.
Yeah, so in Austria.
And then the following week in Silverstone, it was the following week?
In UK, okay. Yeah. That's when he got
Hamilton.
DNF.
No, but that's when Hamilton wins.
Yeah.
So despite DNFing, they still have achieved 29% of their points for the entire season in the last 3 weeks because you have 2 Mercedes wins.
There we go. So
because you went Russell and then you went Hamilton, and now Hamilton gets third as well.
Yeah.
So
and also, as soon as if you're a kind of a doubter about Mercedes, if in the last 3 races Russell has DNF'd and qualified 16 and barely gotten into the points.
Yeah.
From a race, if you love Formula 1 and your F1 fantasy F1 strategy is just modeling after who you like and what you believe in real life Formula 1, I could see people divesting in Mercedes and divesting in George Russell.
Oh, for sure. And again, this is where statistics is infinitely fascinating.
Yeah.
Fascinating. Is that, every time you look at different dynamics and draw correlations, you're seeing one different side of that Rubik's Cube.
Yep.
And so in this specific stat, normally I think the stat gives us so much insight as to who's heating up, but it fails us with Mercedes.
Correct.
Because
that's a good way to look at it. Yeah.
Oh, look, the last 3 weeks they've gotten 29%. So they're doing a little bit better. No. They're doing a lot better.
So
they have 2 wins and a 3rd place here. It's just that Russell happened to DNF and then have a bad qualifying.
Yeah.
But they're doing so much better than this stat purports.
Agreed. Yeah. Then on to Mercedes. We already talked about them. RB. Again, this is where the stats are failing us.
RB,
V-carb,
Baby Red Bull.
36%. They've scored 36% of their points in the last 25% of the races, which is good.
Yeah.
That's still only 64 points, and they're still not doing much.
No. And again, I just think, yes.
Am I just hating or what? What do you think?
I don't think you're hating. I think the most interesting element of V-carb at this point is that they, if you like Daniel Ricciardo, you care about how they're doing just to see if we're going to see him in a car next year.
Yeah.
And this is just one of those things where, Yuki Tsunoda has been performing admirably with I think a subpar car compared to the rest of the grid.
Yeah.
And
I could see that.
But otherwise, Yuki has been a good lower tier driver. But again, with his value going up, I can't afford him anymore if I want to make space for an impact driver.
No, for sure.
So
sure.
It's one of those. They're doing better they're doing better these last 3 weeks than the rest of their season. But I don't really care too much.
Yeah. No, that's actually a perfect way to sum up. Red Bull Racing is they've scored 18% of their points in the last 25% of races.
I mean, and that tracks. Sergio's been on the downturn except this week. And then Max Verstappen, he doesn't have the fastest car. He's still Max Verstappen, but again, he's not in the he's not a guaranteed lead anymore.
Yeah.
So,
and then Williams rounding it off, they 35 points. That is 88% of their overall points. So they've had a really good streak.
Yes,
but
it doesn't take much to tip that percentage.
No, that's kind of like, do you want $1? Yeah, here's another $1. Wow, I've gone up 100%.
Correct.
But no, and over here in column L, we can see the numbers, the values that have gone up. So if we look here, Ferrari, Leclerc and Carlos Sainz have both, their value has increased $4 million since the start of the season. All right.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Kevin Magnussen gone up $5 million. Lance Stroll gone up $4 million. Lewis Hamilton 3.8, Lando Norris 3.2, Max Verstappen gone up 1.1. But you're talking about Yuki Tsunoda. Yuki Tsunoda's gone up 2.4 million. So he used to be, okay, you can get Yuki for 8 million, it'll be fine.
Yeah.
Well, but now he's 10 million, which means now as soon as his value is 10 million, Well, now you have Kevin Magnussen's at 11.1, Esteban Ocon's at 11, Daniel Ricciardo's 10.8, and you with Yuki, Nico Hulkenberg's 8.5. So now with Nico Hulkenberg, who has 71 points, and Yuki Tsunoda has 72, well, as soon as you think Haas is on a streak and VCarb isn't, you can divest of Yuki, save
Correct.
yourself some money, and get to keep the same points,
Yeah.
and be with Haas instead of VCarb. I was one of the huge proponents of VCarb doing well.
Oh,
Like,
sure.
I went big in on Danny Rick and Yuki. It just hasn't been panning out.
And that's the thing. The logic was there.
Yeah.
And so this is one of those again, another one of those realms where fantasy isn't fair to the driver, because Yuki Tsunoda's doing just fine.
He is.
He's got job security. I think he has outperformed expectations. He is
Completely agree.
perennially the guy that people see as the driver number 2 on the team.
Mm-hmm.
But then whoever they bring in, he's either pushing them or outperforming them on a regular basis. And so, and I know I fell victim to that. From the start of this season and
Yeah.
watching all the Drive to Survives to try to catch up on some foundational level of understanding here. I was like, Yuki Tsunoda, not so much, but no, he deserves to be here. But the problem is, as his cost has gone up, it is just not worth it to choose him for your fantasy team in terms of what he will bring to the table for the money that you're spending.
Completely agree. There's a lot of talk. We're getting into a little bit of speculation here before we go talk about our teams.
Yeah, let's do it.
There's been lots of talk about this next race being like the big decider for Sergio Perez. And the talk online and the talk around with the other talking heads are that it's not that Sergio Perez is doing bad.
Sure.
He's just not doing well. And if you were to bring in almost any other driver, put them in a Red Bull,
They would be at least equivalent.
they would be at least equivalent.
Sure.
And now, is that fair to him? I doubt it. He's number 2 in the world. He's earned his seat for the rest of the season.
Yeah.
I truly feel that. As soon as you are number 2 in the champ, if you're the number 2 driver in the world, and then you have a rough season, you're out halfway through the next one, that's pretty crappy.
Oh, sure.
So maybe I'm just talking out of my mouth. Whatever. I am talking out of my mouth. You know what I mean. I'm trying to keep this to be a family show.
I appreciate that.
But there is talk that if he does get ousted, then they'll probably bring in somebody to replace him and probably fleet up Danny Ricciardo and then let Liam Lawson take his spot in VCarb. Do you and I say all that as background for this question.
Yeah.
If for some reason Sergio Perez is out right at the season break, so he'll race in Belgium, and then for some reason he's out.
Sure.
If you're Red Bull, do you bring Daniel Ricciardo or Yuki Tsunoda up to RB? And the reason why I ask is both of these, especially Yuki, consistent, good. What happens when you put them in a no-kidding RB20 or 21 or whichever one they are? If you put them in a no-kidding Red Bull car, I think they'll do great.
At this point, I'm kind of interchangeable on them.
Yeah.
Just because, you look at qualifying times, you look at when people are just trying to achieve a certain time, all 20 cars are within a couple seconds of each other if they're not crashing out.
True.
I don't think the leap from RB to Red Bull is that great that it's going to be like, well, this is where we separate the men from the boys.
Yeah, it's not like you did really well, so if we'll put you in a Red Bull, now suddenly you're going to find another 0.7, another 7/10 or another whole second.
I mean, I don't think it's going to be suddenly too much for one of either of them to handle.
Yeah. I see what you mean. Okay.
So in terms of consistent performance, though, Daniel Ricciardo's had a couple good weeks.
He has.
I think in terms of consistency, I'd go with Yuki. I would like to look at. I would like to take a minute to look at some statistics in terms of qualifying performance, because that's where we've seen the biggest negative impact from Sergio Perez.
That's true.
Is because in multiple instances he has not made it past Q1.
Okay.
Which again, this week, good on him for overcoming that.
Mm-hmm.
But despite this Herculean effort as a driver to rise up 9 positions, that effort nets him 7th place. If he had gotten to, if he can get to Q3, he's going to be the guy who stays approximately where he is.
And that's actually a really good point.
So if I have to choose between Daniel Ricciardo and Yuki Tsunoda, I'm going to see. I want to look back at their qualifying performances and see how far on average either of them has gotten.
Well, and that kind of that's an interesting layer to add to the question, and why it kind of makes the question crap is because we're in the range where, like, nowadays, as soon as Max Verstappen qualifies in the top 3 and Sergio Perez qualifies in the, P17 or whatever,
Sure.
Sergio Perez gets up to, what did he finish, P7?
Uh-huh.
Max Verstappen falls back. Got it. He touched wheels with somebody, but he falls back to P5.
Mm-hmm.
What if we're in an age where the Red Bull car is just the bottom half of the top 10 car, and Max and his once in a generation ability is pushing the Red Bull car beyond where it should be.
Yeah.
And Sergio Perez is driving it the way it should be, which is if you can pass, if you can use the car's strengths, you'll finish in the middle of the top 10. If for some reason you don't, or you just happen to have a bad lap, you're going to qualify low, but you'll still get to the middle of the top 10 anyway.
Sure.
So should they, to kind of go full circle and answer my own question, should you swap out Sergio Perez? Absolutely not. I don't think anyone's going to do any better. They say he's going to do worse. I think it's the car. If the car is really just a middle of the top 10 car, which everyone's saying, everyone, not like pointing, saying like to justify my opinion, but Max Verstappen himself says they don't have the fastest car on the grid anymore. And as soon as they don't, then who do you have in front of you? At least one McLaren, at least one Mercedes. So you're
Gotcha.
number 3.
I don't think you're wrong, but let's look at why Sergio Perez is not getting past Q1. In this case, it's because he crashed.
True.
So it's not.
It was a rough crash too.
Yeah. So it's and everybody's done it,
Yeah.
But if it's because your car's not fast that you didn't get out of Q1, I mean Max did.
True.
If it's because you're crashing that you don't get out of Q1, that's a problem.
That's an issue. Yeah. No, that's a good point.
I think that's in all likelihood why we will probably not see Logan Sargent next year.
Yeah.
And if Sergio Perez is doing the same thing just with a better car, that's not great. So
no, that's a good point. All right, we're going to go and work on moving towards a wrap up, but we're going to discuss our team performances in Hungary and what we're going to talk about going forward. So if you look at, if you want to walk us through the Statham's, or I'm just kind of debrief it.
Yeah, let me go. Let's go with my primary team. So what I thought was interesting about this week is I have 3 very different teams, and all of them were within 20 points of each other.
True.
So which I think just speaks to how much more even the playing field has gotten. So my first team, Red Bull Dragon Fruit, we talked about this last week. We both found ways to go full McLaren and full Haas. So I've got Norris, Piastri, Magnussen, Hülkenberg, and of course I 2x Norris. Even but again,
but this was a smart play.
Yay, teamsmanship, and I think the statistics were on my side to put my DRS on Norris.
Yeah,
and then I have Sargent because I needed space in the finance.
He got your point. He didn't. Yeah,
and he got me a point. He didn't hurt me, which is what I want when he's on my team. Haas got a cumulative 10 points as a constructor, which isn't going to give you much. But,
no, but it was also like it just wasn't. It was hot, and so they're better cool. And I guess from what I've listened to, they're better cool condition cars. So
yeah. So again, I got 194 points with Haas as a constructor, which I think speaks to the strength of McLaren.
Yeah.
But I think it also puts to bed the theory that you can get away with just one solid constructor. I'm going to be moving away from this in the future to get at least a Mercedes or a Ferrari.
Well, and how many points did Mercedes get? Because here, let's look at this real quick. I just thought, then we'll go back. I promise. Constructor.
No, you're fine.
Where am I looking at? Hang on.
I was going to say, if you look at one of my other teams, I have Mercedes.
Oh, in that case, sorry, my bad.
That's all good.
So let's go to Statham's.
So now this is my Ferrari Mercedes team. They got me 184, but it's in this case it's because I picked the wrong Mercedes driver.
Oh yeah.
So again, it was Russell. Not his fault that he had a bad qualifying, but he's the guy I gave my 2x to. So as a result, I got 54 points from him. But if I'd gone Hamilton, it would have been significantly better.
Gotcha.
But again, so I had Sainz, Magnussen, Sargent, Zhou, and Russell, along with Ferrari and Mercedes as my constructors, and that netted me 184 points. I think this is the way to go. I just didn't have the best drivers from either of those top tier constructors.
But you can't help but I get it. Russell had a rough week and Sainz finished in the middle.
Sure.
But Dragonfruit still had 10 more points. And if you look, because you were able to get Piastri and Norris, Piastri got 46 points.
Which means, though, if I had 2x Piastri, I would have gotten 90-something points instead of 46.
Yeah.
92, because math.
But, no, I see what you mean, though.
So
as soon as if McLaren keeps finishing 1-2,
yeah,
then your Red Bull Dragon Fruit, this build that I also have on one of mine, right there, right. I had Gasly though. I hate to see it, and I did autopilot.
okay,
So it gave me Piastri.
Nice.
But I got -19 for
Okay, I gotcha.
Pierre Gasly.
yeah,
But anyway, yeah, with the Stathams, you're right. We need to go with the two top drivers. But
yep,
man, that's just a astonishingly small amount of points for having both of those constructors because they're fighting with each other.
yeah. And then Newbie Alpha, I went.
See, they're just fighting.
I went Mercedes, Ferrari again, but I went with Leclerc and Russell because
okay.
so it was the Russell factor that hurt me there.
Yeah.
But again, was I an idiot for choosing him? I don't think I was.
I don't think you were.
It just
No.
it's one of those. It didn't work out.
He won. Yeah, he was so dominant last. Yeah, I agree.
So it's just wild that you can have that much variability across teams and still have that close of a point spread. So, which again makes this so much more fun. You know, it's not just, oh, look, I did great because Red Bull.
Exactly. Exactly. No longer it's like, well, you had Hulkenberg and I had Jogan Yu, which means, oh, now you're going to win the championship because, we're down to that.
Exactly.
For my teams, my number one team got 206 points, again, which isn't bad, but I was able to get Mercedes and McLaren with Norris.
Uh-huh.
And the reason why, I think is this one, or is it my second one? Yeah, so I took a negative 10 points to get Russell, and I was able to get McLaren, Mercedes, and then both Ferrari drivers.
Oh, not bad.
Both
Okay.
Mercedes drivers, I'm sorry. But I had to get Bottas, and I had to get Sargent.
Sure.
So this is exactly what we talked about earlier in the show, where suddenly you're dumping all your Haas to get two strong drivers.
Yeah, it's
and two
three drivers get you cumulatively 2 points, which again you have to be happy with that they just didn't lose you points.
Exactly.
Yep.
So, and then I was able to do the same thing you did, but I had Gasly because I chalked up his last errors to just happened. No,
Sure.
It happened twice.
No,
He's out.
it's Alpine.
Yep, he's out. So let's going into my team for this week. Here's the big question that I have for us with the McLaren F1 and both Papaya drivers. What do you think about this build? Do we keep it or do we manage it? Because we can, for me, first off, getting rid of Gasly.
I think it worked well because McLaren got P1, P2.
Yeah.
I don't think you can count on that on a week-to-week basis.
Mm-hmm.
So again, we've talked ad nauseum about how great it is that they're a solid team unit. Good for them, but I think you need a better constructor than Haas, or a more point garnering constructor than Haas if you can afford one.
Gotcha. So you can get Mercedes in there, but you can't have both of those drivers.
You cannot.
You cannot.
I would,
at least not with this build. Maybe you can somewhere else.
Here's what I think, and maybe this is a hot take. Maybe this is backtracking on everything we said before about them being a solid unit. I think Oscar Piastri has been given his cookie. Like, dude, you're a support driver. You're a good support driver. Here's your win. Be happy for the rest of the season. Like,
that's not bad.
It's like this is the alternate Ricky Bobby universe.
Yeah,
where Cal Naughton Jr. was allowed to win one, and so he never goes away, and tries to become El Diablo and Magic Man.
Right.
So I think we are not going to see Oscar Piastri win another race.
Okay.
I think he'll rank high, but I think they're like, this is back to the Lando show. You got your win, Oscar.
You got your win, Oscar. Good job. So if we do Lewis Hamilton, I don't have enough money for that, though.
Do you not?
Yeah.
That's
well, if we go boom, boom, yep, don't have enough money for that. Hate to see it.
So do this though, because we're saying I'm gonna feel bad if it doesn't work. But what if you go Russell? Can you afford Russell?
Let's go with because Russell's fine. He's just had
a couple bad weeks.
So is Russell. Let's go to constructor. Can't get Mercedes there. What if we get rid of? I hate to do it, but Magnussen. There we go.
Okay.
10 million. We can get rid of them. So now let's go back.
So we're gonna go back to Kick Sauber and Logan.
So Kick Sauber.
Can we do it? We can do it. Okay. I like this team. You're 2xing Lando. George Russell should do better than he's performed the last 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And you've got you've got two. I love this team.
Okay.
I think this is
I think this works. Like, the only thing that makes me kind of nervous is what if we, again, I might have to use, what if we put Oscar in there for that? Because then as soon as you put Oscar in there,
I think
you can get Lewis Hamilton.
So the question becomes,
See?
that's tough.
That's tough.
I you know what though? I think McLaren's top dog right now. So I would go Lando over Lewis.
Yeah. I think you're right.
I don't think you're an idiot if you go Piastri and Hamilton,
No.
but I think it's Lando and Russell.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's going to get you the slightly higher point total.
So let me see what
team 2 rebuild this and flip-flop them.
well, I'm going to need to let me see. Do I have a okay, see. So I've already used up my chips, and so I'm going to need to reevaluate this cuz I'll be taking negative 20 points because of how much I changed stuff. So I'll reevaluate this, but this is a good build for it.
Oh,
right?
I think this is
I think
beautiful.
that's good.
Yeah.
So then the next question, so I don't want to touch this team because like it's
Lando, Yuki.
The only thing that makes me nervous is Esteban.
Yeah. Well, who else can you get for? You got $12 million.
Yeah, $12 million to play with now.
Maybe take an Aston Martin driver if you can afford one. Can we afford? No, we
Nope,
can't.
can't. We can get Esteban's the top guy. We can get. Let's check season
get
points.
Danny Ricciardo over.
I think so. Get Danny Rick.
Yeah.
But Esteban has 62. Danny Rick has 32. Do you think he's? Let's see how Danny Rick's done the last 3 races.
I'm
10.
scared of Alpine for any.
Oh, me too.
Point, you know,
like me too, because Esteban Ocon for that point 7.64. Like,
but that again, that's just the superstitious me. Like we've been watching all those Viking shows.
oh
like,
yeah,
I'm not going by science at all. I'm going by I saw a crow standing outside my house, so it's a bad omen.
It's
Alpine is the crow,
But then, how about this then? So we're still trying to get. Why we're messing around? Why you bull crapping? I wonder if we have enough to go value. I wonder if we have enough to do.
Oh, what are you trying to upgrade to though? If you're only saving $2 million doing.
But I'm saying now we have Russell.
Oh,
and
I see. Okay.
Norris, and we have Mercedes and McLaren.
Okay, but that's almost the
exact same
the
as
last
the other
team
one.
you just
yeah.
built.
And and this one's the one that's actually that my team 1 is actually like doing pretty good.
Okay.
Then what do you think about this? The team 3, and this will be the last question I have because this is the Mercedes heavy with McLaren splash. And one of this I went through and I got rid of Ferrari.
Dude, I love it.
Yeah.
I think Russell has a good week. I would still at this point I would put Hamilton with my DRS.
Yeah,
but otherwise, dude, as long as the the Junior Crusaders down there don't DNF, that's the only liability that I can see. It's just that it's
the Junior Crusaders.
it's
Oh, I am going to get rid of this. Well, no, I'm going to hold off on getting rid of Pierre Gasly because I want to burn one of my changes. I'm going to go and actually make this change right now. Let me see if I do Mercedes.
Yep. Then you go Russell, right?
Yeah. Then I can go. What happened? Oh, I need to. So that was it because I was going to take a negative.
Because what scares me though is we've been talking so long about those lower tier drivers, and with the exception of Alpine,
yeah,
there hasn't been a lot of DNFing.
There really hasn't. So
they're kind of due for 1 or 5, where it's just mass chaos.
Or do I just go ahead and have this one kind of take over the see, because now I don't feel like my situation is necessarily improved.
No, you got to go cheap.
I need to work. So I'm going to have to decide, and this is a great question. Do I go ahead, in order for me to get Mercedes back onto this team and get rid of Gasly, which I feel I need to do, I'm going to need to take negative 10 points because I'm going to have to do 4 changes.
I think it's worth it.
I think it is too. So let's go ahead and get rid of that. Get rid of that.
The McLaren Haas duo full team thing was a really cool experiment, and I think they outperformed expectations, but strictly because you had P1, P2 for McLaren.
P2, yeah. And if I get rid of them, no, I don't. I'm grasping at straws, trying to see if I can do anything.
But fantasy aside, man, I just feel so good for Haas. I don't think expectations were high. They're we got 2 veteran drivers to at least try to hopefully give us a semi-stable year, and to see them continuously improve. I mean, with the exception of Kevin Magnussen going rogue for a couple weeks.
Yeah.
It's been really cool to see how they do,
Oh, here we go. How about this? We go, because I'm trying to adapt them to just the Mercedes McLaren build, right? That's what we're doing here?
Yeah.
Because then we can go all the way up here
and grab.
I can grab Lance Stroll.
Yeah.
But I don't know if he's worth it.
It's just $15 million for Lance Stroll, man.
So if I get rid of Lance Stroll and I get rid of Because we were just trying to have this be a McLaren Mercedes with whatever, right?
Sure.
Kind of have it mimic the other one.
I thought we were going to go Lando,
Russell,
and then
that was it. We were looking for Russell,
and then on the other team we are going to go Lewis.
That was
Piastri.
it. That was it.
Yeah.
That was it. We were wanting to get Russell, and then doing that, and then right. That's what we were doing here, right? Value. Then kind of click up from the bottom like that. Was that where we were going?
I think so. Yeah.
And then
we're flip flopping.
And it was -20.
Number 1 and number 2 drivers for McLaren and Mercedes.
Yeah.
On the next team.
But for this one, so I'm supposed to be taking the -20 because it sucks.
It does.
It does.
And it's because we're having to get rid of Haas as well as all the musical chairs for the drivers.
Yeah. I'm not gonna pull the trigger on it yet.
Gotcha.
Just because it's such a huge dig. But we're leaving Team 3 and Team 1, right?
Yep.
Okay. Sweet. Oh man, I love Fantasy Formula 1.
This is
Aren't
great.
you happy that all those months ago when we had dinner and my wife was like, "Yeah, you should talk to him about Fantasy Formula 1." I'm like, "All right, fine, I will." So, have you heard about Fantasy Formula 1? And you're like, "What?"
Yeah, no, and I'm so again. I thought I was overstepping so hard. With the, like, hey, I'll be on your podcast. You know,
right?
No, like this is so cool.
For anybody who didn't listen in earlier, like in the year. So I had this podcast going. Scroll all the way down to the bottom. It was pretty atrocious, right? Just me kind of monologuing about F1. And my wife, we were going to dinner at your house, and my wife Amy was like, "Hey, you should totally talk to Ben about the Fantasy Formula podcast." And I thought I was overstepping. I'm like, because I talked to my family about it. I talked to other people. It's like, man, no one's interested in this. It's something I enjoy, but no one else does. And you're like, dude, let's go. And I'm like, all right, cool.
No, to be fair, doing a podcast alone where you're just talking in an empty room,
yeah,
unless you either have to have like this totally shameless bravado about you, or maybe like an unhealthy level of just comfort with just talking to yourself,
right,
and then putting it out there. That's a tall order, man.
It is,
and there's a lot going on. And so again, I was it my shameless pitch? Yes, but I think there is real value in having another person there to bounce even the most basic questions off of.
For sure.
And again, the new guy perspective, where it's like, I don't know what is a dumb question, and I've learned painfully over a number of different careers that it's better to ask the dumb question early on than to still not know and everyone assumes you know.
Agreed.
These are those life lessons you should have learned in your like teens and 20s that sometimes you learn in your late 20s, you know, and it's just like, yeah,
I don't want to be like an idiot, dude. No,
just be the idiot, because half the time you won't ask the question, then you'll have the anxiety, and then someone who you see as way smarter than you will ask the exact same question, and everyone will go, "Oh, that's a really good question,"
and you're like, "But,"
it's like, I had that question. So anyway. But this has been such a blast,
Good.
you know. And again, there's so much theoretical to talk about, and to then have proven wrong,
right?
But yeah, what a fun world.
Yeah,
so
I love it, and for all your listeners out there in Radioland, don't worry, we're during the mid-season break that's coming up. So after Belgium, we have like 3 weeks or a month off.
Yeah.
We are still going to do episodes every week. We're going to be talking about the numbers. We're going to like reevaluate what's going on over the season.
Oh, for sure.
And come up with see what kind of conclusions we can get from looking at it, just broad picture. And again, keeping up on all the news and see what moves we can make going into the second half of the season.
Yep. So thanks for your time this week. We'll see you guys after Belgium.
All right. Cheers. Take care.